What's up guys, welcome to my brand new YouTube tutorial. Today we will use only After Effects and we are going to create a really cool logo animation with a lot of texture like this one. For that we will definitely need some textures, so you can either get your own on free websites like freepik or pexels.com, or you can download mine with the entire project file down below in the description. And to use these textures we will need a good understanding of how some specific effects work, especially one that's called set matte. But if you're not super familiar with this one, then I'm going to try my best to explain it throughout the video. And by the way, I want to thank you so much for leaving a great feedback under my other videos. It makes me really happy that you like them and they help you learn something new. Alright, that's it for the intro. Let's fire After Effects and start creating. So here I have prepared a clear composition, which is basic full HD and 10 seconds duration. And then I've also imported my Nike logo and my two textures. So I'm using this one and then this particle texture, which again you can get on freepik or pexels or wherever. Let's close it back. And the first thing I'm gonna show you is adding texture to the logo itself. So let's create a new composition and call it logo placeholder. And let's make it a square composition. So 1080 by 1080. Press OK and let's drag in our Nike logo just like that. Let's enable the transparency mode and let's just scale it slightly so it's not too close to the edges. And let's go to main comp and drag the logo placeholder on our main composition. And because the logo is black and the background is also black, we cannot see anything, so let's first search for a fill and apply it. Let's also make sure that the logo is in the middle of the composition by hitting the align buttons over here. Go back to main comp. And now let's search for our first effect, which is going to be a CC radial fast blur. Let's apply it, and I'm also going to put it above the fill. And what this effect allows us is to set a blur with a specific center of origin. So you can see, because we have the center over here in the middle, now we are blurring it sort of from inside. But we can see what happens now. If I put it here, you can see that we are now blurring it from this center, so it's sort of going upwards, which is really cool. And now let's also search for the last effect, which is going to be a CC scatterize, and you will see immediately what it does. So if I increase the scatter, you can see we sort of apply a noise to our logo, but we can also control how much we sort of spread the noise from the logo, if it makes sense. So I'm gonna set it very low, let's say 1. If I zoom in, you can see we are applying a nice subtle texture. And that's pretty much all the effects that we're gonna apply to our logo. Although later on we're gonna play around with the direction of the blur, we are also going to play around with the scatterize a bit more. But when it comes to the effects, that's all that we need for the logo. And the next thing that we're gonna do is add an adjustment layer. So I'm going to press Command Option Y, or just go to Layer, New, and Adjustment Layer. And I'm going to search for a color control and apply it, and I'm going to actually apply it 3 times. And the reason for creating these color controls is because throughout the tutorial we will be applying the fills to many more layers, and if you would like to change the colors later on for the entire composition, then you would have to go to each specific layer and then change the fill manually. But if we're gonna use a color control, then we will just have to change it over here. So if I click on the logo placeholder and press E to bring up the effects, expand fill, then click back on the adjustment layer and then take the pick whip where is the fill and then drag it onto the first color control. You can see now if I try to change the color of the logo, we cannot do that because it's now sourced from this color control. And that's exactly the reason why we are doing this, just to save us time later on, so we don't have to go again to all the specific layers and then change all the colors manually. You may have seen this technique when you download a template, then you have the color controls where you just change the color to whichever you want and then it applies to the entire composition. So this is basically the exact same thing. So let's actually set it to white color so we can see the best, and we can also close the logo placeholder effects. And now we can start adding our prepared textures. So let's go to project and let's drag both onto our timeline. You can immediately see, just because we apply the effects onto our logo, it immediately looks pretty much blended in, but we will of course improve that. So let's take our particle texture and put it above the base texture, and let's go and apply our first set matte. So double click to apply it, and here we will use the set matte the same way that we would use a transparency mode when we want to remove the black background. So the same way we would go to transparency mode and click on add to remove the black background, the same way we will switch here the alpha channel to luminance. I actually forgot to scale the particles down, so let's scale it down to fit the composition. And since we masked out the white particles from the background, we can also go ahead and apply a fill effect once again, so now they turn red. And the same way that we did with our logo, we can press E to go to fill, and again parent the color to our color control, so white again. Let's actually rename this layer to color control. And now let's go back to our base texture and search for a curve effect. Let's apply it. And if I start dragging this left bottom point to the right side, you can now see we can make this logo stand out more and make the texture darker, which is what I want. The next thing that I want to adjust is the sharpness of the particles because they are very sharp. So let's search again for a CC scatterize effect and apply it onto our particle texture. And you will see now that if I start increasing the scatter just like this, I'm able to blur out the particles like this. So I think 25 will be fine. You can see that from these particles we were able to get these little ones with the CC scatterize effect. So let's close the layer. So let's go and preview it with the color control. So let's change it maybe, let's say, to green. And you can see it's not very visible, but it adds just a little bit more of the greenish tone over here, for example, and also on the right side in here. And it just adds a little extra to the overall texture. Now I'm going to add another adjustment layer, so Command Option I to put it in and drag it below the color control, and I'm going to search for the effect which is called texturize. I'm gonna put it onto the adjustment layer, and now in the drop down, if I pick the base texture, which is this one, now you can see we can start getting these creases on top of the logo, which again blends the logo a little bit more onto the background. And you can see exactly what the texturize effect does. It takes a texture from a specific layer, in our case is the last one, and applies it on top of the other layers, okay? So if I turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, you can see what difference it does. But to take it to yet another level, I imported another texture, which is this one. So I'm gonna put it onto my timeline and then just change the texture layer from the fifth one to the last one. So now you can see it applied the new texture, and if I preview it, it's much more subtle. But I like this one in this case a bit more because it adds these little dust particles over here. So again, if I turn it off, on, off, on. This one is a little bit more subtle. That's just my preference for this tutorial. Of course, you can go ahead and apply your own textures which you like the most. Awesome, and the last thing that I want to do is to be able to control the light part of our texture. So let's go to our base texture. By the way, you can disable this one. You can see if I disable it or not, it doesn't matter because we already applied the texture in here in the adjustment layer. So let's go again to this base texture and search for a tint effect. Now if I take the white color and start testing it out, you can see now I'm able to change the light parts of our texture. So you can see now it's blue because we selected the blue color. So again, to be able to control it with the main color control, let's press E, bring up the tint. Let's click on color control, and where it says map white 2, let's take the pick whip. And you have two options. You can either plug it in the first color, which is going to follow the same color as we set for the logo, or in my case, I'm going to set it to the third color and I'm going to change it to white because I really like how this looks with only these little green smudges over here. But of course, later on, if you would ever wish, you can always change this third color, let's say to something like this, and then you can operate with 3 different colors, which can give you a really interesting results. And the exact same thing we will do with the matte black 2, but this time we will take the pick whip and plug it onto the middle color, which is the black one over here. So if I test it out, I can go ahead and change the color of our logo to something like orange color. Then we are also able to change the light parts of our texture, so something like blue, for example. You can see it changes the light parts, and then we also have the freedom to change the dark parts of our texture. So if I, for example, put it like a dark red like this, then we can do that as well, which is great. But for now, I'm gonna go back and change the color back to white. And now I want to show you a couple of different variations that we can work on. And for the first one, we will switch the colors. So the background is going to be the color of the logo, and the logo is going to be black in this case. So let's go to 1 second and let's take all these layers and then press Shift Command D to split them and put them on top. And then also let's go to second 2 and do the same, Command Shift D, just for later because I will use another technique over there. And for this middle one, like I said, we will switch the colors. And of course here we have a problem because all the colors are already parented to these source colors. So if I go to our base texture, which is this one, actually I can delete this one because that one is applied to an adjustment layer, so we don't need that one. I can also delete it from here. And over here, because we have the tint, let's press E to bring up the effects, expand the tint, and if I expand these two, now you can see we have these two codes, which basically say that the color is parented to the source colors. And you can see over here it says color control 2, and over here color control 3. So if I delete the number 2 from this one and also the space, now our background will turn into the orange because now we changed the code from the second color in the color control, which was black one, to this orange one because again we deleted the number 2. And the same thing we can do in this code, which says color control 3, and in this one we can change it to number 2. And you can see what it's gonna do. Now it's gonna change the light parts to black ones, which in this case works better because the orange color is already bright enough, alright? And the same thing we will do with the particles and also with the logo. So first let's go with logo, press E to bring up the fill, expand it to show up the code. It says only color control, so it is the first one, and let's put space number 2. And now the logo is turning into black because again we changed the source color. Let's close it, and the last thing we are missing is the particles, and over here again fill, and let's follow here the logo, so color control, and let's add space number 2. So now we turn the smudges to black. So if I turn them off, on, you can see they are not very prominent. If I zoom in again, you can see it's not making a lot of difference, but because this is a new layer and the scatter effect is not connected to anything, then we can go ahead and decrease it to make it more visible. So let's scale it down to maybe 2, like this. And in this variation, I want to have these particles clearer compared to this one where we only have these little smudges. So again, this is just a preference, but it adds a little bit more of a variation between the two versions. And to make it even more different, I can now go to the logo layer and let's change the center of our radial fast blur, which is originally here. So let's put it maybe above the logo somewhere here. And now we have a different direction of the fast blur, which looks awesome as well. So that is the second variation that you can experiment with, and for the third one we are going to put a stroke on our logo. So I'm going to search for a set matte and apply it onto our logo layer. Also don't forget to put it on top of all effects like this, and then we can invert the map, which is gonna make the logo disappear. But if we search for a simple choker and put it on top of the matte as well, we are able to decrease the choke matte, and now you can see we are bringing up the stroke of our logo. So maybe let's put -35 like that, and we have now another variation, which is the stroke effect. But there's actually one extra thing that I want to do with this version, and that's to change the fill color from this orange one to our complementary one. And because it's the third one, let's add number 3 behind the color control over here, and now we change it to white color. So we have now 3 versions, which is this one, and then this one. The next thing that we're going to create is adding another layer of a texture, but this time we will add a slight movement to it with a posterized effect. So let's create a new composition, and Full HD is fine, and let's call it texture posterize. And let's add in our particle texture just like that, and let's scale it down to fit the composition, something like this. And let's also apply a CC reptile effect just like this. And now you can see if I start scaling it right or left, you can see we are able to extend our texture to match the composition. So let's give it 3000 to each, for example. And let's also change the tiling from repeat to checker flip V. And now I will go 4 frames forward and cut the layer and remove this one. Now I'm going to duplicate it a couple of times by pressing Command or Control D. Let's select all of them, right click, then go to Keyframe Assistant, Sequence Layers, make sure that overlap is not selected and press OK. And now we have sequenced the layers after each other, and you can see we have 44 frames, so let's press Command K and let's decrease the amount to 48 frames, so we make it fit the composition, and then I can add one extra over here. And basically now I want to reposition every texture slightly so they are not matching the position, and then we can simply create a posterized effect with all these textures. So this one, and then this one can stay over here, for example, and last 3 of them. Maybe this one can stay where it is, and then this one let's put all the way here. Now we have created a simple textured animation which we can go and use for our project. So let's go back to our main composition and put our texture onto the timeline. And now I will search again for a set matte effect and apply it. And now I will change the alpha channel to luminance. And right now I have applied our texture onto our composition. However, this is not enough because as you can see our composition is now only 48 frames long. So to extend it we can use time remapping. So right click on the layer, then go to time and press on enable time remapping. You can see it added these 2 keyframes. And if I press Alt on a keyboard and press over here onto the stopwatch, I can now type loop out, and then in commas I will put cycle. And if we now extend our composition all across the timeline, you can now see that if I go, for example, here, you can now see that the texture is still ongoing. And as we did before, we can also search for a fill effect, apply it, and then go to effects, fill, and once again parent the color onto our main color. So we give it the exact same color as we did for our logo, which is orange in this case. But again, we can of course go ahead and test it out. So if I change it, let's say to this purple, now it's changing not only the logo, but also these animated particles. And the last technique that I want to show you before creating an actual simple scene is creating a simple reveal effect for our logo. And let's create a new composition. Full HD is fine. Let's name it logo reveal. Maybe let's give it 2 seconds. That should be enough. And I'm going to create 2 new solid layers. So Command Y, or just go to layer, new and solid. And that one is going to be black. And then another one is going to be white. And having the white one selected, I'm going to search for a linear wipe effect, apply it. So now you can see we have a simple wipe effect. And I'm also going to search for a turbulent displace, apply it, and let's scale the amount all the way to, for example, 5000, something like that. And let's also decrease the size to something really small, so maybe 1, like this. That should be fine. And now let's also increase the feather to something like, let's say 450. So now we have created this sort of noisy animation. And I'm also going to add another adjustment layer. So Command Option Y, and let's search for a posterized time. Let's apply it and decrease the posterized time from 24 to 8. So it's not totally smooth. And let's go to main composition, back to project. And if I now put our logo reveal animation on top of our first logo, and we can of course cut the composition, and I take the pick whip tool over here next to the track mat and put it onto the logo reveal, you can now see nothing is revealing, and the reason is that we have to change the alpha matte to luma matte over here. And now if I preview, you can now see that we have created a little logo reveal animation. And everything prepared just like this, we can now go ahead and start building our scene. And for this tutorial, I think 5 seconds long animation will be enough. And let's also clean up our scene a little bit. So for example, this adjustment layer and this texture posterize, we will not touch anymore. So we can hide them by pressing on this button. And the same thing with this texture at the bottom. Let's click here. And now if we click over here, now we hide these layers. They are still there, we just hide them so they are not in our way. And we can fully focus on these animations. So let's go forward, let's say 12 frames, you can see over here, and let's take these 3 layers and cut them. And also this one can be extended all the way, and we can also hide it just like that. And this is going to be our initial logo reveal, so 12 frames is fine. And then let's also take these 3 layers and attach them right after. Then let's go 24 frames, that means it's also going to be 12 frames long. We can for example duplicate this layer, so now you can see it's much darker. And we can decrease the radial blur to let's say 30. And maybe we can increase the scatter to let's say 3. And if I turn it off, now you can see we added a much clearer Nike logo over there. We can potentially scale it down a bit, so it's not the same size as the initial animation. And we can also duplicate by Command D the logo reveal animation and put it on top of this one, and use it for this animation as well. The only thing that we have to switch is the track matte, so let's take the pick whip of the logo, and don't forget to switch the alpha matte to luma matte over here. And again we have the same reveal animation, but this time it's only on the upper layer of the logo. And we can scale this logo reveal composition down so it better matches the logo size. And what I can also do is press R and maybe rotate it 180 degrees. So far we have this, where you can see the second part is subtly darkening itself from the right side, which is really cool. And we can now go ahead and add another part. So for that, let's go and use our third version. Let's shorten them, and this time let's use for example 20 frames, so 114, and let's extend it just like that. And over here we can use the exact same technique. So first of all, I'm going to duplicate our logo, and you can see now we have it much brighter. And let's reduce the radial fast blur to let's say 30, and let's also increase our scatter to let's say 2. Let's cut our logo into 3 parts, so I can actually delete this texture because again we don't need that. And let's select all 3 of them and press Command Shift D to cut them and put them on top. And then also let's do it one more time over here in the middle, Command Shift D, cut them and put them on top again. And over here what we can do is we can take our logo placeholders and scale them down like this, and we can check what's the size. So let's put 40 the size. Then let's go to our next and put for example 60 to both, and on the third one let's go and put 80 this time. So now we have added a variation of our stroke logo which is scaling up just like this. Let's create 2 more variations for this tutorial. So let's extend our composition, and for the next one we are going to use again our initial animation. So let's take these 3 layers, Command D to duplicate them and put them on top. Let's put them at the end like so. And for this version, I'm going to duplicate our logo placeholder once again, press E to go to fill. And for this one, I'm going to change the color control to number 2. So let's put it in. Now we have added a black variation of our logo. Now let's take all 3 of these layers and scale them up quite a bit and put them somewhere around here. And then I will take the black variation and I will position it slightly to the right side. And then let's also decrease the amount of the blur to 30, and also the scatter, let's increase it to, let's say, 3. And I actually want to make them even bigger. So let's take it and scale them something like this. And then once again, I will reposition it slightly like so. And then I'm going to turn off the track matte of the orange one. So now we have only the black one sort of revealing itself like this. So here you can see how it looks with the complete composition so far. Perfect. And the last variation that we're gonna do, let's again extend our composition and let's take the orange one once again. So let's select all of these layers, Command D to duplicate, take them, let's drag them on top and position them at the end like so. And this time I'm going to scale them quite a bit. So let's take it, scale it down, and then we can search for an effect which is called again CC Reptile and apply it to one of our logo placeholders. And let's expand it again quite a lot, so 2000 and 2000. I think, yeah, this is fine. And then I'm going to scale it just a bit more to make them fit like so. And then I will also animate this so the logos are appearing from the center up and down. So let's go somewhere around here and click on the stopwatches, and then let's go to the beginning. And then let's set it to 0 and 0. If I preview, you can see the little logos are revealing themselves like this. However, we have a problem because there is a harsh edge over here, and that is definitely not something I want. So let's press U to bring up the keyframes. Let's go in the middle of these ones and let's set new keyframes by clicking here and here. And then if I select all of them and I right click and I press toggle hold keyframe, you can now see there is no in-between animation between these keyframes, so they are just revealing themselves like this. So if I take this effect and press Command C and copy it onto the other logo placeholder, and I also delete the logo reveal because I want them to be completely dark without any darkening effect. And just like that, we have created another variation with these little logos that are sort of going upwards and downwards from the center. And they create a really nice contrast to these huge logos that we have created right before that. Alright guys, I don't want to make this tutorial super long, but I'm sure you now understand the entire process and the techniques behind these animations. But using these exact same techniques, here is the final version of my animation. What I really like about this animation is that you can take it and use it as a template for whichever logo you want. The only thing that you have to do is to replace it in the logo placeholder and it automatically updates itself. Alright, that's it for today. If you learned something new, that I would be super happy if you leave a thumbs up or a comment down below, and feel free to subscribe to my channel because I have so many more tutorials lined up. So thanks again for watching and see you next time.